You're just a jigaboo, trying to find something to do. Well, you're a wanna be better than me.
Hi everyone, my name is Dom Griffin. I'm a film critic and you're watching the Armchair Auteur. This is an ongoing video series I've been doing where I talk about new movies, old movies, screenplay analysis, that sort of thing. So if you're the kind of person who's really into film culture and likes to see people pick it apart, please consider subscribing. Keeping with our ongoing spooky theme for October, we are going to be reviewing a new horror movie called Bad Hair, directed by Dear White People director Justin Simien, that just dropped on Hulu this week. So going into this movie, I actually had very low expectations for the film in general. Sort of a mixture of my apprehension towards pretty much any black horror movie that's been greenlit since Get Out was a success, just because a lot of those movies have all been like real sort of disappointments. And also, just some of the marketing for this film just gave me kind of a cringy, try-hard vibe that I wasn't really interested in. All that said, the movie definitely surprised me. Bad Hair, set in the 1980s, stars Elle Lorraine, who is an absolute find and one of the best new screen queens out there at the moment, as Anna Bloodsoe, an executive assistant at a network called Culture, sort of an MTV variant focused on black music. She's trying to move out of her administrative role into something on air, but finds colorism and an aversion to her natural hair as big barriers to breaking out. When her boss is replaced by Vanessa Williams, playing basically like an evil and older version of herself, Anna becomes pressured from all angles to weave to fit in better with her surroundings. It works, tragicomically, up until the weave appears to grow sentience, thirsting on blood, and plotting to take over her entire body. Now, initially, I sort of thought the premise for this movie sounded like a neat idea for like a short film, and I was a little bit skeptical about someone's ability to stretch it out to feature length in a believable way. But Justin Simien, as a filmmaker, truly exceeded my expectations here. Bad Hair is at its best when it's confidently recreating the vibe and feel of a classical horror flick, with canted angles, languid camera movement, foreboding music cues, and of course, truly over-the-top sound design. The effects work with the evil hair weave calls to mind werewolf films of years past, while more specifically seeming to homage the comedy inherent to something like The Little Shop of Horrors, blended with something like the social critique of Larry Cohen's The Stuff. That latter film in particular did a fantastic job of balancing a monster of sorts that was as laughable as it was unsettling. Here, Simien pulls off a similar feat, taking an idea that sounds like a bad joke and imbuing it with genuine fear. I also really truly have to applaud the dynamism in some of the set pieces, giving me serious Sam Raimi vibes in the best way possible. Also some minor Venom vibes. The movie is pretty ambitious thematically, capturing a lot of kitchen table talk topics like colorism, intercommunity conflict, and professional anxiety of selling out within a corporate culture. It's a lot to get into like kind of such a heavy genre exercise. More often than not, the ideas at play really fit in well with the movie and don't overpower the genre stuff. Actually, playing with a lot of these ideas plays better, in my opinion, than most modern black horror that all settles for really basic, overt racist metaphor stuff. It's more interesting to me to talk about stuff within the community and find interesting things to say and point out to people than it is to just sort of point at like basic interchangeable white boogeymen. That said, it is a lot to fit into something that should be a much more lean thriller type movie. All the gristle left on the bone here is mostly dedicated to the fact that this movie is set in the 1980s and the entire creative team clearly had a huge blast recreating period-appropriate 1980s music video clips, costume design, things of that nature that really set the tone and vibe of the movie. But in luxuriating in those period details, the movie often lingers too long on moments that are not dramatically necessary and kind of hold the narrative back from flowing particularly well. I sort of wish the movie spent a little bit less time focusing on those details and the awkward act of trying to convince the entire audience that they're attracted to Jay Pharoah, and spent more time focusing on the interesting family dynamics between Anna and her semi-adopted family. Anna's character's parents died when she was very young, so she was raised by her aunt, uncle, and her cousin, and each of them has sort of like a very Afrocentric, kind of bougie, uppity vibe, and they're always preaching pro-black things at her, but they also still are very hypocritical and treat her kind of poorly and also really exacerbate a lot of her anxiety and esteem issues related to her appearance and her hair. And to me, the movie really sings most when it works in those sorts of thematic issues with like a lot of the more base horror elements, where he's able to take something as simple and realistic as, you know, being tender-headed and turning that into fodder for actual on-screen horror that's genuinely uncomfortable. Look, I've only had my hair braided and cornrowed like twice in my entire existence on Earth, and it was like some of the most painful experiences of my life. And watching one set piece of this film in particular made me want to cry, and I think that's pretty effective. But unfortunately, Simien and company fumble the bag in the final act with a closing sequence that runs on way too long, features entirely too much of Lena Waithe getting in cheap comedy long past the point in the narrative where punchlines could still be considered effective, and it trips on its own 2 feet with a particularly egregious final twist in the coda. It's not so much that the ending is ineffectual or doesn't work, it's just that the longer it runs on, the more it moves away from like the basic thrills and stuff that they're able to get across the rest of the movie. It feels like a real waste of time, and trying to shove in comedy at the last minute just feels ineffectual. It reminds me of how Edgar Wright was saying how they had to cut out some of the jokes in the last few minutes of Shaun of the Dead, because once you've seen Shaun's mom die, nothing's really funny anymore. This movie doesn't have that level of transgression in terms of the kills or victims, but it still feels wrong to just throw in these goofy little moments like this late in the game. And that final twist, I won't spoil it here, isn't super important to the narrative, so I don't get that mad about it, but when I got to it, I definitely rolled my eyes. But if I'm being fair, this is one of the sole instances where a good movie having a bad ending does not bother the experience for me as much. Generally speaking, I'll forgive a bad movie with a good ending because good endings are like tight. But here it's sort of the opposite. I don't really mind because everything that I liked about the movie outweighs the stuff that I didn't. Your mileage may vary, obviously, but I think it's definitely worth a watch. If for nothing other than to see Justin Simien sort of continue to evolve as a filmmaker, he's definitely come a long way, in my opinion, visual storytelling-wise, since Dear White People. And also for the lead actress. I think Elle Lorraine is incredible. I think she's like one of the best things in this movie or any movie I've seen this year, and I'd love to see her get more work and more big roles like this. She's great. Bad Hair is available on Hulu to stream. Definitely give it a chance if you're interested in this sort of thing. I think it works really well, like really well. I also want to remind you guys that the podcast I joined, Late Fees, has a new episode out this week. This week I marathon the entire Saw franchise so we could talk about it on the podcast. I did that for y'all, so everybody else in the podcast. It's me and the boys as usual, but we also have guest stars from the podcast Girl That's Scary. Kat and Jazz joined the show to talk about the movies with us. They're amazing. That podcast is amazing. I'll link that down below as well. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you have subscribed, hit the little bell icon so you get notifications when I put out new videos. We still have plenty more to go over in October here for Spooky Month, so keep it tuned here. Hope you guys are staying safe, wearing your masks, being good to each other, that sort of thing. Have a great day. Bye.